He's anti-Semite.
A Hitler admirer. Nick Fuentes is actually a Hitler admirer.
But he literally is not a good
That is
human
a
being.
different thing.
Excuse me, you have Jennifer Welch on your show very often, and you've never pushed back, as she has called my husband a white nationalist.
Hold on.
That is no
Katie.
different than Nick Fuentes going on Tucker Carlson's
Katie,
show. It's not, and you should admit it.
Well, hold on. Wait, hold on. How is it anything similar? It's not remotely similar at all.
Abby Phillip on her CNN show had a panel that included far-right winger Katie Miller, the wife of Stephen Miller. And if you are not familiar with Katie Miller, she is a real piece of work. As you might imagine on Abby Phillip's show, with a panel member like this, things got very heated. Abby Phillip also had Scott Jennings, another far-right loon. We're going to take a look at clips from this panel on Abby Phillip's show. I want to share my thoughts on this as well. This is a good one. Let's get into it together.
One of the most fascinating storylines of Donald Trump's second term are these questions about whether his hold on MAGA is loosening. Some of the president's staunchest supporters have taken issue with his foreign deals, his military strikes, his ballrooms, the economy, and of course, the Epstein files. And now there is a clear battle for whatever MAGA looks like after Trump. And there will be an after Trump. Marjorie Taylor Greene abruptly resigning after the president called her a traitor. And there are warnings that even more Republicans will follow over the way the White House has been treating them lately. It's also prevalent in MAGA media, most recently over Tucker Carlson's interview with Holocaust denier Nick Fuentes, which Trump later defended. And Carlson doesn't mince words about the party itself.
And the Republican Party, which is almost to the point where it's just useless, and I'm going to have to oppose it because I hate them too much, but because they're such betrayers.
Now that interview with Nick Fuentes is not just about Nick Fuentes, it's also about Tucker Carlson. And maybe Tucker is trying to create more of a wedge in MAGA, but it's clear that people are looking for the next messenger for Trump after Trump. Who do you think it's going to be?
I think President Trump has made it very clear he'd like to see J.D. Vance, Marco Rubio. There are many people who can speak eloquently to what the MAGA base is about, which is growing our economy, stopping illegal immigration, putting Americans first, which is what Make America Great Again means, is Americans first, and Americans doing what we can do to grow and live in the best country in the world. But I want to go back to Marjorie Taylor Greene for a second. Just because she left the party isn't indicative of some larger MAGA revolt and President Trump's grasp on the MAGA movement. She is someone who blew up his phone multiple times a day, acting like she was the center of the universe and main character syndrome, when in reality, President Trump's job is not member maintenance and dealing with a specific member of Congress. He is the leader of the free world who has a lot more on his plate than returning Marjorie Taylor Greene's calls back every 5 minutes.
But it's not just her, right? I mean, there are also other Republicans. Here's a quote in Punch Bowl. A senior House Republican says the entire White House team has treated all members like garbage, all. The arrogance of this White House team is off-putting to members who are run roughshod and threatened. And some of them are anticipating that this is going to be a tough midterm. Some of them are going to call it quits for all kinds of different reasons. It's coming up when it comes to health care. They don't want to vote on the plan that's coming out of the White House. There's a lot going on here that's not just Marjorie Taylor Greene.
And part of it is the disconnect between having heard President Trump, for example, and the Biden administration calling for the release of the Epstein files, which, yes, Biden could have released them too. But then now that he's in the position to do that, we're not seeing any of that happen. It's this, right, but they're not being released. So the challenge that I see is that when someone like Marjorie Taylor,
they have 30 days.
Marjorie Taylor Greene, who was so leaning in hard on the MAGA movement, everything from Epstein files to the disconnect between working class and elites and every conspiracy theory you could possibly find, and she was leaning in hard. To lose her is a suggestion that you're losing many other people who were part of that movement. When you have people who work in the FBI threatening to resign because they feel that this core MAGA issue was mishandled, that's a challenge in your coalition. Now, what we don't hear is President Trump saying, like Tucker Carlson, saying that he wants to either take over the entire Republican Party, reshape it in his image. So what is the message from this president that now brings this coalition back together now that it's fracturing?
So can we just go to the data, CNN's own data from our own data analyst Harriet? And President Trump has an 87% approval rating among Republicans, which is higher than Barack Obama's approval rating among Democrats at this point in his term. higher than where George W. Bush was in his term. He is the strongest for his own party, strongest president at this point in his second term in the modern era. That's number one. Number two, Marjorie Taylor Greene, I think, had a falling out with the president over politics. He showed her a poll that said she couldn't win statewide in Georgia.
That's exactly
she got mad. She got mad. And by the way, she stands with a group of isolationists who just happen to disagree with the president over, say, taking away Iran's nuclear weapons and some other issues. That's fine. He's the president. She's not. And if you want to talk about whether the president has a hold on his party or whether he's a lame duck, I'll just submit that when he withdrew his endorsement of Greene, she lasted a week and then had to resign from Congress. That's not weakness. That is
a couple things about that.
One thing that I think is funny here from Scott Jennings is I've been watching him for a long time on Abby Phillip's show, and he very rarely ever has any data on anything. There's been many, many times, like with the Venezuelan ships being bombed, where Abby Phillip has talked about the fact that fentanyl does not come from Venezuela and has given numbers on where drugs come from and all of that, actual data, and Scott Jennings just scoffs at that. But of course, a poll done by CNN, the liberals, quote unquote, CNN, then Scott Jennings is all over that. You know, these are the guys with MAGA. MAGA are the guys, and Scott Jennings and the rest of MAGA, they're all the same with this. Oh, polling, you believe in polling, but here it's a poll that shows things favorably for the dear leader. And of course, Scott Jennings is all over it. I don't doubt that Trump is still very popular among Republicans. You know, anybody at this point that calls themselves a Republican, to me, is all on board with all the horrible stuff that Donald Trump is doing and is completely on board with creeps like Scott Jennings and Katie Miller.
Scott, because first of all, I think you understand that a lot of Trump's MAGA base is not just people who are registered Republicans. A lot of them are people who are new to the system. And I think that many of those, the problem for Republicans, just like it was this past November when they lost, was that getting those people to come back out of the woodwork is part of the issue. They come out for Trump, they don't come out for anyone else. But the second thing, you know, I do wonder if this issue of the isolationism that Marjorie Taylor Greene and maybe the Tucker Carlson espouse is part of the problem here, because Trump attracted them into the party because he kind of seemed isolationist at times. But now everybody is wondering, is that really what he is? I mean, I think some of the ideological confusion is part of the story here.
It is very hard to see how you can give $40 billion to Argentina.
We didn't give them. We did a currency
for their
swap. And we made a profit on it.
But you gave them 20.
And then say that Europe is a problem and they're not doing enough. And that Ukraine, you know, everything should resolve itself very magically.
I don't think it's Marjorie Taylor Greene's fault that she thought that Trump was an isolationist.
No, actually,
I think part of the problem is that Trump's vision for politics is whatever Trump wants.
No,
and all of those other people, but Scott, there are isolationists in the MAGA tent. What happens to them? Do they just go away? Do they just go away?
Look, here's the deal. A lot of people tried to ascribe their own personal views to Trump, and they tried to, I guess, influence him into their own personal views or make their personal views stick to him. He has actually, on the issue of Iran, shown extreme moral clarity about this for decades. He has always said they cannot be allowed to have a nuclear weapon. In his first term, he fired cruise missiles into Syria. We took out Soleimani. Trump has never been an isolationist, and anybody walking around in 2025 who thinks that he is being willfully blind or just stupid. He has been for smart engagement. He's not for adventurism, but he's been for smart engagement since he came on the national scene.
Steve Bannon said to Axios, Trump knows his movement's base better than anyone, but a lot of his base feels that he's spending too much time on Palestine and not enough on East Palestine, Ohio.
So listen, the fact is that Donald Trump doesn't have politics. And I'm tired of people ascribing a politic to Donald Trump. He has interests, and most of those interests revolve around himself. And I think people realize that Donald Trump is very transactional. And at the end of the day, the transactions that Donald Trump makes usually benefit in some way his worldview, himself, his family, his politics. That's first and foremost. And the thing that bothers me the most is that people think, for example, that MAGA, I know you mentioned Marco Rubio and J.D. Vance. MAGA's like, it's Ticketmaster. It's non-transferable. If J.D. Vance or Marco Rubio think they're about to inherit the MAGA base, there's nothing about There's nothing about J.D. Vance. And let me put a bow on this. One more thing. Because what they don't realize is that even a part of this MAGA base, the fact that we're even mentioning Nick Fuentes, he's 4'11", he's misogynistic, and he's anti-Semitic, but yet he is somebody who has the pulse of the Republican base right now. They need to excise him.
That's absolutely
Nick
false.
does not have the pulse of the Republican base. It's what Democrats want to say to divide the Republican base when that isn't true. But I want to go back to something really quick.
Tucker Carlson was just bowing in front of him.
Can I also just
Tucker
add,
Carlson hosted him on his show. He did not bow, nor did he kneel.
But you mentioned
to Nick Fuentes.
You mentioned J.D. Vance, and he also did not denounce Tucker for hosting
Correct.
Nick Fuentes.
I mean, what are we talking
about? So what
does
it say that Vance didn't feel like part of what if he wants to lead the Republican Party, part of what he has to do is to police the boundaries of what's acceptable and what's not, and not say, hey, Tucker, unacceptable. Don't do that.
It's not up to you or myself to police speech in our country.
I mean, shouldn't it be up to J.D. Vance to say this is not part of our movement?
Are you okay? Are you okay with Nick Fuentes?
Here we go. I'm a Jew. Do you want to go there? And let's say this.
Yeah, I just asked the question. Was yes or no?
Yes, I'm okay. If Nick Fuentes wants to be able to speak freely in our country, he has every right to do so. Do I agree with his views? Do I think that they should become mainstream in our country?
Yes or no question.
Absolutely not.
But hold on.
I really want to go back to this for 1 second.
But this isn't about whether he can speak freely. It's about whether someone like Tucker Carlson, who is a very powerful force in the conservative movement.
You host people on your show all the time who call my husband and myself a Nazi. So how is that any different from Tucker Carlson going on Nick Fuentes having Tucker Carlson on his show? It's not different.
He's actually
anti-Semitic. He's anti-Semitic.
A Hitler admirer. Nick Fuentes is actually a Hitler admirer.
But he literally is not a good human being.
That is a different thing.
Excuse me. You have Jennifer Welch on your show very often, and you've never pushed back as she has called my husband a white nationalist.
Hold on.
That is no different than Nick Fuentes going on Tucker Carlson's show. It's not, and you should admit it.
Well, hold on. How is it anything similar? It's not remotely similar at all. Nick Fuentes sits around and says that he likes Hitler. How is that
what does
similar
Katie have to do with it? What does she have to do with it? She has nothing to do with it. Literally nothing.
Scott, Katie is the person who just said to me that it is comparable to say that Nick Fuentes, who is literally a neo-Nazi, is the same as somebody, a liberal, who has an opinion, who is not a neo-Nazi. They are not
a hateful opinion.
The same.
How do you want? Excuse me. Let's go back to this point one more time.
But
Nick
Katie,
Fuentes can espouse an opinion on Tucker Carlson's show.
It is not the same.
And he didn't push back the same way you didn't push back when someone called someone in my family a Nazi.
Hold on a second.
It's not different.
Hold on a second.
It's not.
If someone comes on this show and says, I love Hitler and I admire what he did, they would never, first of all, I would never invite them on the show and they would never be invited back. So those two things are not the same thing.
But yet you've gone on Jennifer Welch's podcast. It's the same thing.
They are not the same thing.
What I think is so,
but Katie, hold on, Katie.
No, we can
Do you
agree to
believe that
disagree.
Jennifer Welch has a right to say something negative about your husband?
The same way Nick Fuentes has the right to say what he wants to say.
So you think
No difference.
you think that it's okay? Hold on. Do you think it is okay for Jennifer Welch? Is she allowed to say something negative about your husband?
Absolutely, and it's your job as a moderator then to push back.
So that's the first thing.
It's the same way you're asking Tucker Carlson to push back against Nick Fuentes.
But hold on, Nick Fuentes.
Is it not different?
Nick Fuentes is espousing, he's not describing someone else as a Nazi. He is saying, I admire Nazis. You don't think that's a different thing?
Do you believe my husband's a Nazi? You allow someone on your show to say it.
Do you think those things are different or not?
I don't think anybody
it's
around
the same equitable comparison
listen,
for Nick Fuentes to go on Tucker Carlson's show as you to have people to have on your show.
You are making a comparison of two things that are not in any way the same. I acknowledge and listen, when
it's
people
happened more than once, Abby.
But hold on.
At one point, it's a common occurrence.
When people say their opinions, I don't endorse them, but I also am not responsible for their opinions.
So doesn't that apply to Tucker Carlson?
That is different from a person themselves describing themselves as a hate monger.
Is Tucker Carlson responsible for Nick Fuentes' opinions?
But hold on a second. I am also not a Republican Party official or a Democrat Party official.
Neither is
and
Tucker
so I'm
Carlson.
asking you about you as a Republican and who you think is the leader of your party, right?
Right
and
now it's President Donald Trump.
And I'm asking your opinion, okay? If you think that J.D. Vance is that person, do you think that he should be sitting at a table and nodding along with Nick Fuentes, yes or no?
I don't believe J.D. Vance has ever sat and nodded along with Nick Fuentes.
Do you think that Tucker Carlson? Do you think it is okay for J.D. Vance to think it's okay for Tucker Carlson to sit and nod along with?
I think it's okay for Tucker Carlson to have Nick Fuentes on the show the same way you have people on your show who espouse similar views.
Well, hold on, that's all I asked you, and we can just leave it at that. Because at the end of the day, that is what the Republican Party has to decide. Do they care whether or not someone who has a loud voice in their party is bringing on somebody who is encouraging neo-Nazism.
Wait,
and if you
do the
think that
Democrats
that
not
is
have to
okay,
decide?
Wait,
Because
if you think that's
they
okay,
harbour all
then
sorts of
that's fine.
anti-Semitism.
Let's go back to the murder trial.
Don't the Democrats-
Let's go back to the murder trial. Should we?
Here's where
So we have to leave it at that. Next.
So typical with Scott Jennings and now Katie Miller on Abby Phillip show. It's always but the Democrats. Everything, Abby Phillip could say it's raining outside, and Scott Jennings would say, yeah, but what about the Democrats who said the sun is shining? And people have been saying for a long time, who would actually marry Stephen Miller? Well, we've seen now the person who would marry Stephen Miller. Katie Miller seems to be just as nasty as what Stephen Miller is. And also with the false equivalencies, Katie Miller is following the MAGA playbook here with, well, he has a right to say whatever he wants to say. Are you saying that he doesn't have a right to say this? No. No one is saying stifle freedom of speech of these figures like Nick Fuentes. What people are saying, Abby Phillip is saying on her show, is this guy speaks for a certain percentage of Republicans. They think he's great. He's been to the White House. He goes on Tucker Carlson's show. J.D. Vance doesn't denounce him. All they simply have to do is say, hey, this guy doesn't speak for us. We don't want anything to do with him. He can be on shows and do whatever he wants to do and all of that, but Donald Trump doesn't want to have anything to do with him. J.D. Vance doesn't want to have anything to do with him. People within the Donald Trump administration don't want to have anything to do with him. That's all they have to do. And Katie Miller could say, yeah, my husband and I think that Nick Fuentes is a bad guy, and we denounce these horrible things that he's saying. That's not stifling his freedom of speech or taking away his right to say whatever he wants to say. But it's always gaslighting. Scott Jennings there and Katie Miller are trying to team up on Abby Phillip to say, well, I forget what the name of the woman who was the guest that Katie Miller keeps squawking about. But again, it's whataboutism. What about this person that you had on, Abby Phillip, instead of directly addressing Nick Fuentes, which is who Abby Phillip is trying to talk about. This is another case where I wish that Abby Phillip would have just cut her mic. And hopefully she doesn't, I'm sure this went viral enough that they'll probably have Katie Miller back on. But what does this person actually bring to the discussion? She's obviously not somebody who can have a rational conversation. The same thing with Scott Jennings, where he just rolls his eyes and throws out a bunch of nonsense. They can't find some right-wing guests that actually have some substance and can actually debate with people without the constant whataboutism and the acting like children. I mean, Scott Jennings, Katie Miller, Ben Ferguson, these other ones that go on there, they just act like such children. And I love that Abby Phillip brought up, this I think is a really important point about MAGA in general, where she said that the Republican Party is whatever Donald Trump says it is. If Donald Trump would come out tomorrow and try to implement Medicare for all and call it Trump Care, all these people who have been saying socialism, communism would just be saying, this is clearly the program that we need. I mean, they're already talking about, Scott Jennings has done this on Abby Phillip's show, how bad they think the insurance companies are because Trump came out and said, let's just give money directly to the people. If Bernie Sanders were saying that, Scott Jennings and the rest of MAGA would be squawking about communism and socialism and Marxism and whatever other ism they can come up with. But Abby Phillip is right that there is no real ideology behind Donald Trump. Also, as Bakari Seller said, there's no ideology, there's no real politics with Donald Trump. It's all transactional and just whatever he can do to get more money and power. And Scott Jennings and Katie Miller and all the rest of MAGA are more than happy to go along with that. But let me know what you think about all this. What do you think about this so-called MAGA civil war with Marjorie Taylor Greene and Tucker Carlson and these other figures? Now Katie Miller is involved with it. Hopefully her media career is short-lived. I mean, would you want to hear this nasty person, as Donald Trump would say, a nasty, nasty woman? Would you want to hear her on TV all the time? I hope she's not a regular guest on Abby Phillip's show. Having Scott Jennings on there regularly is bad enough. But let me know in the comments what you think about all this. Make sure to give me a like and subscribe. I'm Chris on Culture, and I'll see you in the next video.